guys, my name's Kim and this is my channel Expedition Through Pages. Today I'm going to be chatting about some of the fiction books that I read recently and just let you know my thoughts on them. So the first book I want to talk to you about is The Song of Achilles. I'm probably going to butcher all the names when I talk about this book because I cannot pronounce Greek mythological names at all. Could barely pronounce mythological then. But this book is by Madeline Miller and I'm completely late to the party with this one. I know it was very popular a few years ago and it's just like well loved in general. But I have to say I absolutely 100% agree with the people that love this book. I thought the way that Madeline Miller wrote was just so captivating and just intriguing and I just wanted to keep reading. I feel like she just brought the whole world completely to life and I just believed every part of it, even though it's about gods. Yeah, I haven't really read huge amounts about the gods and the myths before, and I hadn't read a story about Achilles before, so I didn't know any of the original story. And to be honest, I have looked up bits and pieces now, but I still don't really know the story, more traditional story as it's been told. The little bit that I do know about it does differ from what happens in the book anyway, so that was kind of null and void, my little bit of knowledge about it. But this book is mainly following Patroclus, and he is a young prince in his own little kingdom, and then something happens and it means that he is banished from the kingdom and he's stripped of his title and everything like that. And he has to go and live in a different kingdom, a different palace, and there he's kind of just living with the other boys that are, I don't know what they're doing, they're helping out around the place, can't remember now, it was a while ago since I read it. And he's just kind of a loner and just completely keeps to himself, very shy. And then the prince in that part of the world is Achilles, and he takes a shine to Patroclus, takes an interest in him, and they become friends. And their relationship kind of continues to grow and grow. Achilles is actually half god because his mother was a sea goddess, but his mother and father aren't together. It was a kind of a forced thing. And because he's half god, it means he has these kind of abilities that makes him very useful to humans. And he's kind of led on this path. There's a bit of a prophecy about him. He's on a road to his destiny. And the story is about that, but I feel like it's mainly just about their relationship and how they react to the situations and how Patroclus reacts to the situations that he's put in. There's conflicting wants, that his goddess mother wants one thing and the king wants another thing, and there's a battle that's about to happen, everything like that. It's quite intense. And yeah, I just really loved it. I was really attached to the characters, especially Patroclus. I mean, you're completely following from his point of view. But everything that he kind of goes through, you just feel it. And so yeah, if you haven't read this book, I would highly recommend it. It's definitely up there as my favourite book of the year so far. I really just totally loved it. I actually read it because I read it for Eurovision-a-thon, which was run by Helen from Helen's Bookhaven, and Eurovision-a-thon was really fun as well, so I recommend that for next year if you like readathons. Then the next book I finished was Darwin's Dragons by Lindsay Galvin, and I'm not actually going to talk about this here because I just wanted to say I'm going to talk about it in my wrap-up for STEM books that I read. So that's science, technology, engineering and mathematics. Anything that I would put in that category, if it's fiction or non-fiction, I'm going to talk about it in that video. Spoiler alert, I did like this too. And then next up, I have finished this random little novella. It's probably not random at all, it's probably well known, but basically my mum gave me a box of books that were at her house that I've had for years. Actually, a lot of them are up there, I don't know if you can see them, yeah. I did do an unboxing of them, but then it turned out to be a rubbish video, so I didn't put it up. But yeah, this was in the box and I ended up picking it up because on Caitlin's channel, she runs a channel, The Lit Review, she started the Book Covered Book Club where the focus is reading books based on their covers basically. And each month there's a theme for the cover that Caitlin like bases the choice on. And so for the month of June, it's a yellow cover. So I know this doesn't look very yellow, but she said it doesn't matter if like it's just like a bit of yellow. It was actually bright yellow. But the back is definitely bright yellow and the spine as well, so I felt like it counted, and the little crown and the inside cover is yellow too, so I think it works. So this book, The Uncommon Reader by Alan Bennett, is about the Queen, which I didn't know when I picked it up. I actually have no idea why I have this book or why it was in, it's probably not even mine, but anyway, I picked it up just because it was yellow and it follows the Queen, and it's kind of an imagining of what would happen if the Queen suddenly like got really into reading and started loving books. So she's out one day walking her dogs, as she must do, and there's like this library, mobile library that's parked outside the palace, and she goes in there, and because she's being polite, she just asks, or she says she'll take a book out, and she reads it and she doesn't really care too much for it. And then she goes back and ends up getting another book, and she meets this young lad who's also into reading, and then they kind of form this really sweet friendship where he's kind of guiding her, teaching her about reading, and helps her choose the books that she picks up next and everything like that. And it was just like a really kind of charming book to read. I actually really liked it. I never would have thought that I would like anything like this. Like, if you told me it was about the Queen, I'd probably just roll my eyes and move on. But I actually thought it was really thought-provoking. So you don't read it from the Queen's point of view necessarily, but it is focused mainly on her. But then you also hear the inner kind of voices of the people around her and everything like that. And through her reading, you see the reactions of the people that work for her and are trying to guide her in her events that she's got to go to and her meetings that she has to go to all the time. You see it from their perspective when suddenly this Queen, who is always so engaging and kind of follows a script, when she meets different people who are obviously very nervous to meet her because she's the Queen, they know the advice to give to people before they meet the Queen. They kind of know the things that she's going to ask them, like about how's the traffic and all that kind of stuff, just basic stuff. And then suddenly she's into reading and she's getting all these new perspectives from everywhere, and she doesn't respond in the same way. She kind of loses interest in what she has to do and her work in a way that she never has done before. And they find it really frustrating and it's quite funny. But the people that work for her as well, you meet the Prime Minister. I think this was written in like 2008, so I'm pretty sure he's a bit of a parody on Tony Blair. And there's an advisor that she has from New Zealand. I will say that the Queen makes a lot of digs about him being from New Zealand, which I thought was a bit weird and out of place. But that aside, you do kind of learn of their prejudices about things and their very narrow-mindedness about certain situations in this book. Yeah, he like doesn't shy away from showing them quite plainly. Like I said, I really loved the writing style. I thought it was very comical throughout. I laughed out loud quite a few times. And also it made me think about the Queen, and from the perspective of the Queen, if you think about it, like when you're famous, and if you've always been famous, everyone that you meet is so scared to meet you. You would never have a normal conversation in your life. It just kind of made me think, like, how would I view the world if that was how everyone was with me? If everyone I met in public was nervous and wasn't normal and didn't treat me like another person that was just a person, how would that make me understand them as people? You know, how would I have empathy for other people if nobody acted normally around me? You know, if I was the Queen. So yeah, for a little tiny book, it's, as I say, it's just a novella. It's like 120 pages, 121 pages, yeah. But I thought it was thought-provoking and I thought it was funny, and I did really like it. In the end, I thought it was good. I would like to read more of his books. I actually have another one here, Slut. So I'm looking forward to giving this a go. So I don't know where these books came from, but I'm pleased that I have them. So yeah, it's probably not everybody's cup of tea, but I ended up really enjoying this, and I think I gave it 4 stars in the end. Next up, I ended up finishing a book which I can never remember the name of. Oh, it's Mysterious Invitation by Bernice Bloom, and this we read for the kind of family friends book club that I do at home. And yeah, I don't want to say too much about this book because I didn't really like it, so I don't want to dwell on it too much or bash it too much either, but it just wasn't my cup of tea. I didn't enjoy the writing, I didn't really enjoy the story, and yeah, I think the idea of the story was good, but it wasn't executed in a way where I could enjoy it. That's the politest way to say it, I think. So this book is about, well, you're following a girl whose name I have forgotten. Anyway, she receives an invitation to a funeral for this guy called Reginald. She has no idea why she's received this invitation, and it transpires that 6 people have received this invitation. Nobody knows each other, and they have to go alone with absolutely nobody else to this hotel in the middle of Wales, in the middle of nowhere, in order to work out what's going on. They're basically been told nothing, so they only know where to go, they don't know, and they know they have to go to the funeral, and that's it, and they know they have to stay the night. So it sounds very much like And Then There Were None. So there was a bit at the beginning where she was like, oh, it'll be fine, and she wasn't worried about it at all, and her boyfriend was like, this sounds dodgy. It actually has two separate timelines, so you're in the modern day timeline where these people are trying to work out what on earth is going on, and then you flip back in time as you're kind of gathering information, which leads up to what's going on. And that bit I thought was actually really good. You went back to the war, and you meet a character who was an Italian prisoner of war who was made to go and work on this farm in Wales, and you see his relationship with this family in Wales. And that bit I found quite good, and I became quite attached to the characters. But I would say my biggest criticism with this book is that you would meet loads of different characters, and then there would not really be any kind of resolving of the character or resolving of storylines. Like, I felt like you would meet people and then you would be invested, and then they'd just kind of disappear and you wouldn't really hear anything of them ever again. So it felt very much like it was used for strategic purposes just to move the story along, rather than actually getting to know the characters or anything like that. And the characters that there were there, especially in the group of people that were trying to work out what was going on, they felt very stereotypical and just unbelievable, really. And it was a bit kind of cookie cutter characters, in my opinion. But yeah, so I found it frustrating. I think the majority of us in the book club found it frustrating to read about. So it was a shame, because I think the concept is actually really interesting, and going back in time and learning about prisoners of war and everything like that, I felt like it had so much potential, but for me it just kind of fell short of that potential. There was 2 parts to the book, and I only ended up reading the first part. I didn't go on to read the second part. The first part did have a wrap up, and you did find out what was going on, and then there was another little mystery, which was another short book, and I didn't read that in the end. Okay, but I'm going to end this video on a good note, because I've just finished The Golden Fall by Robin Hobb. This is the 8th book in the Elderling series. I nearly said Elderling Along, but that's the read along I'm following, run by Becca in the books. And the second book in the Tawny Man trilogy. So I can't really say anything about this book. The first book in the whole of the Elderling series is called Assassin's Apprentice, and it follows a young boy named Fitz, who is the bastard son of the king in waiting, and when it comes to light that he exists, the king in waiting abdicates the throne and goes off. And then for political reasons, the young boy is taken into the castle and he is trained to be the royal assassin. And that's kind of the basic plot, but there's so much to this world. There's such deep magical systems and everything like that. This is the first big fantasy series I've ever read, so to be honest, I'm under no authority to compare it to anything at all. But I just love it. It's just so interesting. But this book in particular, I always find with Robin Hobb books that the first 200 pages actually start really slow. And I'm not bored, but it's just very day-to-day life. And I've really come to expect that now when I pick up one of these books, that you just have to get through the first 200, 250 pages, and then it all kicks off. And that is exactly what happened in this book as well. So, but I also feel you need that part at the beginning, because it just deepens the world and it lets you know real intricacies about the characters. If it was all action, 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 you wouldn't have that. So I don't begrudge it, even though I don't massively enjoy that part of the book. I still think it's really valuable. And yeah, when this book kicked off, and it suddenly got very exciting. And I wish I could talk about it, but I can't. But yeah, if you like fantasy and you haven't read any of Robin Hobb's books, I would recommend them. They are slow burn, like I've said, but I just think it's so worth it. The world is just so deep, and it just keeps extending and extending and extending, and I just absolutely love it. But yeah, I will definitely give this 5 stars, even though the first, pages were slow, whatever. It's still really good, and I'm still really intrigued, and I want to pick up the next book straight away, but I've got other stuff to read. This has already distracted me off my TBR trail for this month. I just couldn't stop reading it, so yeah, but it's great. I recommend, highly, highly recommend. So yeah, so those are all the recent fiction books that I've read recently, and I'm currently reading fiction-wise at the moment Little Dorrit by Charles Darwin? That is not correct. I'm currently reading Little Dorrit by Charles Dickens at the moment, and I'm really liking that. Actually, that's pleasantly surprising me as well. So I'm listening to it on audio, and I like the audio narrator guy, but I will tell you more about that next time I do one of these videos. If you've read any of these books, let me know your thoughts on them as well, and also let me know if there are any recent reads that you've read recently that you would recommend as well, because even though I have way too many books to read, I'm always like looking for new recommendations as well. Especially if you've read any like Greek myths retellings that you really like. I'd be really interested to know about that, because now, yeah, like I said, totally interest sparked, want to read more stuff. If it's like the Song of Achilles, then I'd love it. Yeah, so that's everything. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.